Hey there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Game On, a podcast. It's a part of Bay Hackle Sports. I'm Jeff Taylor alongside Jack Taylor, and state playoffs got kicked off Tuesday night. Some shockers, some surprises, some not so surprising when we talk about probably Lake Norman and the success they've had. Just some thoughts on maybe the first round.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see, you get a couple of, leapfrogs they have, where the conference champion gets leaped over to allow for another team to get into the playoffs, the postseason. So, you have like Chambers, they win their conference. They beat North Mech, and that was a huge shocker.
Right.
Now they do get in there a 13 seed, North Mech being the 3 seed.
Right.
You'd think your conference champion should be higher ranked than who, but that's how it goes in high school basketball.
That's the way it goes.
But we've got the good amount of the teams that we thought would make it through the field did. There was some teams that were happy to just make it in. Audrey Kelly, an early exit in the conference tournament, and they still able to get in and play a game. Whether that happened or not. I think a big surprise was for me was the big game to look at was Chambers and Hickory Ridge. Hickory Ridge had been. They upset Mooresville.
Right.
They held their own with Lake Norman.
Right.
They only lose by a point to Chambers.
Right.
So that was a huge game, and then you saw another upset as well.
Yeah,
you saw a upset.
Well, yeah, it was Hopewell taking on Charlotte Catholic, and I got there and could only stay for the first half. I had to get to another game, but Hopewell came out of the gate with confidence, and it ended up being a 53-52 ball game. So Hopewell won by a point. And for Catholic, they just got out of the gate slow, and Hopewell, I mean, the longer you let a team hang around, the tougher they are to beat. But Hopewell actually jumped out to about a double-digit lead in the first half.
Yeah.
And really just outplayed them, out-hustled them on the boards, which I can't remember the kid's name from Charlotte Catholic inside the big guy. I'll remember it later. But, Hopewell didn't have the size on the inside, but they had the heart and just kept out rebounding them. The second chance points they got underwards in terms of offensive rebounds, the easy putbacks, I was kind of stunned. And they just really couldn't seem to do a whole lot of wrong.
Yeah.
And their defensive pressure, while I was there, I know that Catholic had a couple turnovers. So I got a feeling they weren't real happy with the way their season came to a close.
No, you have an early exit in your conference tournament that you're hosting. You lose to Butler in the semifinals,
right.
And then you get knocked out there, and so you're happy to get to be able to host a game, and you're the 16th seed taking on Hopewell. And look, it's what we said. For one thing, it's one thing for football, but especially for basketball. That conference pound for pound in the Queen City 3A4A is ridiculous.
It is
with North Mech, you have West Charlotte. Huff's in the tournament, Hopewell's in the tournament. It's like it's constantly Chambers in the tournament. It's a constant firefight in that conference. So
and speaking of which, you mentioned Butler. So that was another game that I had a chance to go see. Butler playing Myers Park, which I think was
it's a 9 versus a 24.
Yeah. And so and it was a good ball game. I think it ended up being a 9-point win for Myers Park.
But that's the one that kind of has me scratching my head a little bit. Butler, they're the conference runner-up.
Right.
Myers Park wins the conference championship and wins the tournament. Loses the tournament. I'm so sorry. They lost in the tournament game.
Right.
Or in the championship. But the way Myers Park, whether it was just recency bias, but the seasons Myers Park's had, you could say, they had a really tough schedule, but they didn't do well in that schedule. It'd be a 9 seed.
Yeah,
It'd be a top 10. Whereas Butler had a pretty much similar season to them. Maybe not the same out-of-conference schedule, but in terms of performance and how they do, make them at a 24 seed.
Well, and I want to give props to two players that I saw play last night. For Butler, a kid by the name of Terrence Badio. I got there to the start of the second half, and I think the first 4 buckets in the second half for Butler were scored by this kid. It was crazy. And then, on the other side, for Myers Park, they have a kid, Bram Early. He's a senior, point guard. I don't know that I've seen a more pure jump shot in our area. Like, so basically, as I was shooting for our highlights, it was either Badio or Early, and it was like it was crazy. I kept going, is that the same kid? Is that the same kid? Is that the same kid? And it was, and I'm like, wow. So I think for the first 4 minutes of the third quarter, it was those two guys who were knocking it out. It was kind of crazy.
And that was for Myers Park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Myers Park.
And the crazy part now is, so there was an upset in the first round. Reagan, the 25 seed, upsets Northern Guilford. So now Myers Park gets to host another game. They host another game in the second round, taking on the 25th seed in Reagan with a shot to get into the third round.
Yeah.
And from the season, the way they started their season off, you get your conference outright win at the very end of the regular season.
We go back to it. You lose you lose a great coach, and Coach Taylor, who
and have one of the youngest coaches.
One of the youngest coaches. Yeah, I didn't know he was that young.
Yeah.
And to do what you've done, and now you're hosting another game. Kudos. I mean, you always listen. You get your foot in the door. You get into the dance.
And this is when basketball matters.
This is when basketball matters. And as you build confidence and continue to play, who knows?
Yeah. So there's some interesting matchups in the 4A. Lake Norman, they took down Cuthbertson, so they'll be playing Hopewell. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup.
That'll be an interesting ball game. I mean, Lake Norman's Lake Norman. But like I said, Hopewell, they got nothing to lose. And the way they played, and I don't know that Lake Norman, I can't remember the final score of their game.
They won 89-74 over Cuthbertson.
Okay, so
Cuthbertson also plays in an incredibly hard conference.
Right. So it wasn't a blowout or anything.
No.
So you always got to be ready.
We've looked at Marvin Ridge in the same conference. They lost, but they only lost by 7 to the number 2 seed.
Right.
They almost had a chance to upset them. So that was a good game for Marvin Ridge to end out their year.
Right.
Not obviously the way they wanted to, but it just shows how tough again that conference is. Weddington's in. They're hosting another game. We go down the list. Independence hosting Mooresville.
That's going to be a good ball game.
Yeah.
That's going to be a good ball game. We've watched Indy play a couple of times. And they're just they're big, they're fast, well coached, disciplined, and they play ball. But I haven't seen Mooresville.
But we've seen Hickory Ridge, and Hickory Ridge took down Mooresville in the conference tournament. And we saw at the very beginning of the year, the very first game for Independence this season was up against Hickory Ridge, and Hickory Ridge almost came away with a win out of that one.
I'm trying to remember who I saw Independence play last week. I can tell you this, though. What surprised me about Indy was they didn't get out of the gate quick. And all of these games, and I keep going back to it, I've said it all year long, this basketball is one of those things I think you got to get out of the gate quick. Because especially in the tournament, playing a lower seed, you got to get out of the gate quick. You got to get dominant. You got to just go ahead and kind of impose your will and go.
Absolutely. So then Chambers, they get a slight win over Hickory Ridge, and now they're going to be having to go onto the road to take on McDowell in the 4 seed.
Got it.
North Met gets to host Davie County, so they'll come into town, and then Weddington hosting East Forsyth. Weddington beat Coxsville in the first round, and again, South Meck almost pulled up the upset against Davie, losing by 3 points to Davie. So there was almost a chance there. East Meck season's done. And then we saw Marvin Ridge season done as well. You go into the 3A, you have Ashbrook still sitting at the 1 seed. They handle West Charlotte. Concord getting a big win.
Kudos to them, man. I think they were the 25 seed.
And on the road.
Yeah, on the road against a
8 seed Ledford.
Yeah, and beat them by 3?
Beat them by 3 points.
So kudos to them. I've watched them play all year long. A fun team to watch. They're just I don't know how else to put it. They're fun to watch in terms of their energy and enthusiasm. I don't want to say they're the Savannah Bananas, but you know what I'm getting at. They're out there having a good time, and when you play loose, which is what I think they do, you get into tournament time and you're the lower seed, the looser you can be and have fun. So yeah, congrats to them.
And they in the other bracket behind them, Central Davidson beats Piedmont.
Yeah.
So now it's a 24 seed going up against a 25 seed.
So one of you're going to have a 20+ seed going into the third round.
Absolutely. You go down the line, North Lincoln handles North Henderson. Hunter Huss beats Statesville, so you're going to have a good matchup between North Lincoln and Hunter Huss. That'll be a good rivalry there. J.M. Robinson, they get a win, so they're going to host High Point Central, another 20 seed, upsetting a 13 seed.
Yeah, a 20 seed's coming at it.
Dudley playing East Lincoln. East Lincoln, the 19 seed, beating Hickory. That was huge.
That was huge, yeah.
That's an insane upset. We've seen Hickory all year. They made a huge run last year. They continued to go, and we've seen them a couple times. They had a dominant team. So for East Lincoln to get that win, 72-70 over Hickory, was huge.
Big win.
That was one of the biggest upsets around.
And when you mentioned the 20 seeds too, or the 20+ seeds, you do get back into that seeding again. Some questions of could they be higher? Like a 20 seed could have very well been like a 8 seed.
Exactly. The way
it works with your conference, all of that.
It's even different.
Like you mentioned it.
It's even different than football. They're playing their conference games twice sometimes, depending on their conference.
Right.
Their non-conference games are a little different. So then you keep going online. Northwest Cabarrus 6 seed upsetting Freedom 72-54. The 26 seed beating the 7 seed. Northwest Cabarrus and now Crest, who was going to have to go on the road if Freedom won, will get to now host Northwest Cabarrus. But you better be.
So we had a 20, a 24, a 25, and a 26.
A 20 right now in the second round for the 3A.
3A.
Let me look at. There's a 25 there.
The 24.
There's a 25 in the 4A. That's the only one.
25,
There's a 25, a 24, a 20, and now a 26.
Wow.
All in the second round for the 3A.
Wow.
So Crest better, not hold their breath.
No, yeah, you better, yeah.
They just took down a 7 seed and did it handily too, 72 to 54. That's no last second buzzer beater.
No. To go into somebody else's gym.
They'll be coming to Crest now. We saw, Kings Mountain, their season ends. Central Cabarrus, just such a fall from, their dominance, not losing a game in 3 seasons to go from now losing in the first round 64 to 41. They were the 31 seed, so you hope to see them get back to prominence.
They will.
The reign had to end at some point in time, but
right.
It was one of the best ones you've ever seen.
You don't want to see it end like that, though,
no.
maybe.
Looking into now the 2A, you got Monroe hosting Hendersonville, so that'll be an 8 and a 9. That's good. Then you've got, and this is one that everyone was hoping for, and especially when you saw it on the bracket, Maiden, the 5 seed, Lincolnton, the 12 seed.
Right.
Huge rivalry between those two schools.
Period.
I think a fight broke out the last time they took to the basketball court, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah.
I have to go check in on that, but that's going to be Maiden hosting Lincolnton.
I mean, just the area rivalry itself.
It's huge. So everyone, and the NCHSAA knew what they were doing.
Oh, of course
putting those two at those seeds to where the 5, Maiden's at the 5, Lincolnton's at the 12.
Yeah, and that gym may be filled to capacity.
Absolutely.
You better get there early for that one.
Absolutely. Then you got Salisbury hosting Pine Lake Prep, another area team. Community School Davidson, the 19 seed, they pull off an upset over Surrey Central, so they're going to play North Surrey, the 3 seed. You'll have Lincoln Charter playing Mount Pleasant, a 6 and an 11. Shelby getting the win over RS Central just barely, but they will be playing Owen High School, the 7 seed and a 10 seed. And then another huge one, another big upset. We talked about the 20 seeds.
Right.
Bandy's beating Burns.
Right.
Forest Hills,
Here we go.
31 seed,
Yep.
beating number 2 Randleman by 8.
Yeah.
The 31 seed to make it in. That is amazing. And now they're in the second round. They're going to Bandy's, mind you. But
so it's not March Madness. What can we call it? What do they call it? They call it anything? February Frenzy?
I mean, yeah. That's so kudos to Forest Hills.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
That's
had a great football season.
Yeah.
And now, you ride the coattails.
Making a run in the playoffs.
I mean, hey.
And then lastly, the 1A, you've got North Rowan. They got a win over North Stokes. Not anything to, that was a shocker. They will be going to Thomas Jefferson. Corvin Community continuing to do what they've done. They beat Bessemer City 80 to 32. I apologize for my chuckle there. I just seen that score for the first time. They'll be hosting College Prep and Leadership Academy. We saw a couple other schools in our areas. Their season end, Union Academy lost to Queens Grant. Bishop McGinnis still going forward. They won 75 to 25.
Wow.
And then that will round out the 1A. So there's no shortage of good games. That's all Friday night, of course.
Right.
So, you've got big area rivalries when you have Maiden and Lincolnton. You're going to see some good games for some teams up north with Lake Norman and Hopewell. Some pretty Independence Mooresville. You've got no shortage of good matchups there.
And then you got these 20-plus seeds looking to
that's
continue to make some noise.
6 or 7 20-plus seeds, and then not to even mention, the 31 seed there at the end. Which,
exactly.
If I got to look, I think might be the lowest seed surviving in the men's brackets.
Oh, I think it probably
I'd have to double-check right now, but I would be shocked if there's a 32 seed. We would have seen it. Then you go to the women's. So you see Porter Ridge lost, unfortunately. They had a great season. They were going back and forth. They ended up losing. South Meck beats Reagan, so they're hosting Davie on Friday night. Marvin Ridge getting a big win. They're going to be playing Grimsley. Grimsley beat Audrey Kell, so Marvin Ridge up against Grimsley.
That'll be a good battle.
They'll be hosting Grimsley.
Okay.
Another good one we saw like the conference championships for both sides was Lake Norman Hickory Ridge. It was Lake Norman Hickory Ridge both ways.
Yep.
And so the women for Hickory Ridge get a win over Ragsdale. They'll be taking on Mallard Creek, so that'll be another good Northern Charlotte matchup.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see that one. Watauga gets a win over TC Roberson, and Huff pulls out the win over Weddington.
Really?
Yep, they get a 48 to 43.
Wow.
So they get an upset there. The 19 and the 14, there was not a lot of 14 seeds that made it out of the first round. A lot of 19s getting through. So Huff will travel to Watauga.
Okay.
Then you've got Northern Guilford getting the win, and then a big one, and we were waiting on this, Charlotte Catholic.
Yep.
We know how good their program is, how historic their program is.
It's strong.
How much D1 athletes they put out.
Yep.
They win. They beat South Caldwell 77 to 57.
Okay.
So they'll be taking on the road, taking on Northern Guilford, who beat Rocky River.
Right.
So end of Rocky River season. Then here's a big one. Butler getting the win over Myers Park for the women. North Met getting the win over Southeast Guilford. We saw North Mech losing the conference championship as well to Mallard Creek. To Mallard Creek. So Butler will be hosting North Mech.
Wow.
For the women's second round at Butler at 7 p.m. That'll be a great matchup.
Butler's strong.
Butler is strong.
Once again, well coached. Just a good team. Just very disciplined. They do what they need to do when they do it. I'm trying to remember, and please forgive me.
That'll be a good matchup.
I'm looking at something real quick.
That'll be a good matchup between those two teams. You saw North Mac, they came kind of slow out the gate too, up against Mallard Creek, and they were, the favorites for both the men and the women's. So, they both make it through the second round. Of course, they're focusing on the state championship and the state tournament. That's where they want to get to. But that should be a really good game. And then rounding out the 4A, you've got Lake Norman hosting Northwest Guilford. Northwest Guilford pulling up the upset over East Forsyth. Lake Norman able to handle Cox Mill. So you've still got both Lake Normans in. You've still got both North Mechs in.
That's what it was.
And then you've still...
Coach Sanders over at Butler.
Oh, yeah.
Coach Sanders over at Butler.
He's been there forever.
Been there forever. I think he coaches the track team. He was doing something else this year. I can't remember what it was.
He's doing everything.
I want to say it was lacrosse or something.
I think he's doing everything.
But and his energy on the sideline, you want to go watch somebody who's fun to watch on the sidelines on basketball, go check out Butler and check out Coach Sanders.
Absolutely. So now looking at the 3A, had a couple upsets here too. Northwest Cabarrus their season end by 4 points, losing to Rockingham County. The 17 taking on the 16 seed. Ashbrook almost pulled up the upset over Freedom, lost 69-62, so their season ends. But then you see West Charlotte, the 9 seed, losing to Dudley 50-47, ending their season out.
Tough pill to swallow.
But hey, I'm sure everyone at Beatty's Ford Road is pretty happy about the state championship of football. So they're willing to swallow
they're good.
A couple losses in the state tournament. Of course, they want to have as many as they can get. Robinson handles Central Davidson, and High Brighton ends up upsetting East Lincoln.
Okay.
The 21 seed beating the 12 seed, so Robinson will be hosting High Brighton.
All right.
Then you go down the line. Hunter Huss beating Franklin, just barely, but they did. And then AC Reynolds beating Ashe County, so Hunter Huss will be on the road taking on AC Reynolds. Going down the line, North Lincoln beating Crest 72-26.
Wow.
North Lincoln, the 3 seed, Crest, the 30 seed. The North Lincoln girls have been dominant all season long.
Yeah.
So they'll be hosting Irwin, who just barely beat South Point 45-43. North Lincoln would have loved to see South Point for the rivalry, but they'll take and for the lower seed. But hey, they'll take a win.
Take what they got.
3 versus a 14. Lake Norman Charter sees a loss. North Iredell sees a loss. You go down the line, Parkwood sees a loss, so you got a 23 seed in the second round for the women there again.
Okay.
And then the Central Cabarrus girls, they lose to Pisgah as well, so that's the end of their season for Central Cabarrus. Down into the 2A, you've got another couple of games to look at. Shelby beating up on Burns, Hendersonville beating North Forsyth, so Shelby will be hosting Hendersonville in the second round.
Good win for Shelby.
Yep, Lincoln Charter beating Lincolnton. They'll be playing Forbush, who beat Monroe in the first round.
Okay.
But the Maiden girls won't see Lincolnton girls because Lincolnton lost, but Maiden made it through, beating Wheatmore. They'll be playing TW Andrews, so that will be on the road for the second round. Bandy's got the win again, another 19 beating a 14 seed.
Wow.
I don't think a single 14 seed made it out of the first round. Bandy's beat Northern Surrey by 20, so they'll be taking on Southwestern Randolph in the second round. You've got Forest Hills, they got the win over West Stanley. Community School of Davidson girls lost 53-20, or 53-40, excuse me. So Forest Hills will be taking on East Surrey, and then Lexington gets the win over Salisbury, and Mount Pleasant got upset by East Rutherford.
Wow.
Another 20-plus seed in the second round. So Lexington will be hosting East Rutherford in that second round. And then finally, on the 1A, we take a look. North Rowan losing to Bishop McGinnis, so Bishop McGinnis moves forward in both regards. Thomas Jefferson beating East Wilkes, Queens Grant beating Draw, so Thomas Jefferson will be hosting Queens Grant. We go down the line, Union Academy gets a win, they'll be going up against Mountain Heritage. Bessemer City, for the girls that were dominating throughout the season, had the highest scorer, the highest scoring player in the country per game. They lose in the first round. They were the 30 seed. They lose 72-21. So that's, they're going to be definitely looking forward to next season to try to, they're going to be losing that player as well.
That was the young lady who was averaging like
70 points a game.
And they only scored 20.
And they only scored 21 points. So that was a breakdown for them at the end. So you hate to see it end like that. You keep going down the line. Christ the King is going to be hosting South Stokes. And then that will round out our look at the teams in our area that are still in the tournament. So you've still got some good games. You know, you lose a little bit more in the lower brackets, but you've still got some really good games in 3A and 4A. When you look at Hickory Ridge, Mallard Creek, you look at Butler and North Mech, you've still got some pretty good games going forward in that bracket.
Yeah.
So a lot of good basketball still to play on Friday night. So it should be really cool to see.
Take a deep breath.
Yep. Yeah. You think these brackets are bad? Just wait to see once they move into
I can't even wrap
into
my
8
mind
classifications.
Yeah, I can't even wrap my mind around it. So you would have eight brackets of state tournaments.
Yep. And not really sure how much they're going to they'll delegate when it comes to basketball.
And then the question is, because there's what, 64 teams in each one right now.
Yep, there's still
32 on
60.
each
So
side?
yep. So they guess they're looking to go down to 32 on each side. So you just have 16.
Wow.
But yeah, a lot.
That means a lot of good teams could be sitting at home.
A lot of good teams could be sitting at home. But then that's where you get these 70 to 32, 80 to 40.
Right.
Okay, maybe you wash out some of those.
Right.
But then you get some of these big. You have. Like I said, if you're looking at the cutoff, we can count on both hands the amount of 20-plus seeds that made it through to the second round for men's and women's.
Yeah.
And that's something you lose going forward.
Yeah.
You have and how many 19 seeds beat 14 seeds? If you just cap it at 16, how many of those are you going to lose if you go down to a 16-team aside bracket?
You're losing those Cinderella teams.
Yeah. And
that kind of not good.
And it also will. Then it might course correct where if you're splitting up the state that many ways,
right?
Like you might hit your max of good teams. You might only have 16 or 32 good teams in a classification. Right. But then it becomes again this. If you have like for football, we're already seeing it. We're seeing split conferences 8A, 7A. That was the one thing about the 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A is that for the most part it was very few split conferences, especially as you got higher up. There's the Queen City 3A, 4A is obviously the most notable one in our area. Right. The rest are 4As. There's a couple 2A, 1A conferences, but so that allows for, how you get automatic bids into the playoffs or how you're going to have that. So now if you have these split conferences, how do conference tournaments work? How does your RPI work in terms of who they're going to be playing? We've talked about it for football, and it'll affect basketball as well.
They got some work ahead of them.
It's definitely going to be a bit interesting to see how they're going to make that work.
So that's the public side. Mm-hmm. We're still not done with the private schools. They have at Providence Day on Saturday the All-Star game for the private schools. I think they've got like 40 girls, 40 guys, somewhere along in there, and they're all coming out to Providence Day. It'll be Saturday. The girls play at noon. The guys play at 2 or right after. And I don't know how many colleges are already represented in terms of kids who've signed. But it's going to be a pretty big deal. They did it last year. They had a great turnout. So that is Saturday at noon and 2. You can catch it on BayHackleSports.com. If you can't get out there, we'll be streaming both those games. And, it's just good way to bring in the talent and let that's what's so cool about basketball a lot of times is you get into all this, but then all the holiday tournaments, the all-star games, it just makes it kind of cool. And given the private school guys, they had their championship games last weekend, right? So this is kind of the last hurrah for them, but you like to see it.
Absolutely, no, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot more laid back than the football games in terms of like you have the Queen City obviously All-Star games, and then you have your your Shrine Bowl, your East-West Bowl, wherever. This is just more kind of a showcase, and so it's a lot, and especially for the private school when you have just such a wide range of talent from the private school kids. Guys like Bryce Slay that you see just making ridiculous plays. So now they're going to they got nothing to lose. They're
go
playing.
Out and have fun.
Yeah, go out and have fun. So it should be really awesome to watch the whole thing too.
Absolutely. You can check that out, like I said, on BayHackleSports.com on Saturday. Girls at noon, guys at 2. So I think we've covered the hardwoods pretty good. Of course, next week will be pretty much closer to the quarters, I guess. Quarters and semis, probably that away. But, of course, Jack here will have highlights Friday night of a couple of the games. You can't get to everyone.
Nope. Wish you could.
No, I know. We wish we could. And he'll keep you up to date with the social media and everything like that. So that's going to wrap up this episode of Game On, a podcast brought to you by Bayhackle Sports. Make sure wherever you watch, listen, however you handle your podcast, check us out. Give us a like, a follow, comment. We'd love to hear from you. Until then, enjoy your week. Enjoy all the high school all the high school sports that are going on. And we will catch you next week on Game On.